In the annals of history, few figures command as much reverence and mystery as the Pope. But imagine a time, not so long ago, when a Pope found himself not on a gilded throne, but standing before a secular court, accused of crimes against the state. What if I told you that the shocking trial of a Holy Roman Pontiff, not just any pontiff, but Pope Formosus, ended with his decomposed corpse being propped up, judged, and then subjected to a fate so grotesque it defies belief? How could such an unthinkable act occur in the heart of Christendom? To understand this nightmare, we need to rewind to the late 9th century, a period often called the Dark Age of the Papacy. Rome was less a spiritual capital and more a political battlefield, a brutal arena where powerful noble families, ambitious monarchs, and ruthless factions vied for control. The Papacy, once a beacon of spiritual authority, had become a pawn in these earthly games. Popes rose and fell with alarming frequency, often at the whim of warlords and emperors. Think of it as a deadly Game of Thrones, but with holy vestments and damning anathemas. During this time, the concept of a stable succession was laughable, and the sacred office of Peter was frequently bought, sold, or seized by force. The city itself was a maze of warring families, the Spoletans, the Formosans, the factions of competing emperors, each determined to install their own man on the chair of St. Peter. This wasn't just about theology, it was about power, land, and influence across the fragmented remains of the Carolingian Empire. This volatile backdrop set the stage for one of the most bizarre and disturbing events in papal history, an event that would stain the reputation of the Holy See for centuries to come. Into this chaotic world stepped Formosus, a man of considerable intellect and political savvy. He had served as a bishop, a papal legate, and was known for his diplomatic missions. But his ambition was seen by many as a dangerous trait. He had been excommunicated years earlier for alleged disloyalty, for aspiring to the papacy during the reign of Pope John VIII. Think about that. A future pope, excommunicated for wanting to be pope, only to be later restored. It was a clear sign of the blurred lines between spiritual law and political maneuvering. When Formosus finally ascended to the papal throne in 891, he did so amidst a storm of controversy. His previous excommunication, despite being lifted, provided a convenient weapon for his enemies. His political alliances further fueled their rage. Formosus had crowned Arnulf of Carinthia as Holy Roman Emperor, a move that enraged the powerful Spoleto family who favored their own claimant. This wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a matter of survival for these powerful Roman families. Formosus died in 896, a natural death it seemed, but the grudges against him festered. His successor, Pope Boniface VI, lasted only 15 days before dying, or being deposed. Then came Stephen VI, a man whose hatred for Formosus burned with an almost insane intensity. Egged on by the Spoleto faction, Stephen decided that Formosus's every act as pope, including his ordinations, his consecrations, and even his very election, must be nullified. But how do you put a dead man on trial? Stephen VI, in an act of unprecedented vindictiveness, decided to do the unthinkable. He would exhume Formosus's corpse and subject it to a posthumous trial. The very idea was an affront to both sacred and secular law. Yet the forces aligned against Formosus were so potent, so consumed by a desire to erase his legacy, that they pushed this horrifying agenda forward. The stage was set for a spectacle of macabre justice, a scene that would forever be known as the Cadaver Synod. And the worst was yet to come. The year was 897. The Basilica of St. John Lateran, one of the holiest sites in Christendom, was transformed into an unholy courtroom. The air was thick with the stench of incense and something far more foul. Before a trembling assembly of bishops, deacons, and a terrified Roman populace, a gruesome sight was unveiled. From its tomb, Pope Formosus's 9-month-old cadaver was exhumed. His body, by now in an advanced state of decomposition, was dressed in full papal vestments, propped upright on a throne. His lifeless eyes, presumably long gone, stared blankly forward as if in some ghastly tableau. Pope Stephen VI, his face contorted with rage, presided over this unholy proceeding. A deacon was coerced into standing behind the grisly defendant, tasked with speaking in the dead pope's defense, a macabre echo for Formosus's silent, rotting lips. The charges were read aloud, violating canon law by acting as a bishop after his excommunication, aspiring to the papacy, and transposing from one see to another, essentially holding two bishoprics at once. Stephen VI railed against the silent figure, his accusations growing more vehement with each passing moment. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Formosus was found guilty on all counts. His papacy was declared null and void. His acts, including all his ordinations, were retroactively invalidated. But the humiliation didn't end there. In a final, horrifying act of ritualistic degradation, Formosus's dead body was stripped of its papal vestments. The 3 fingers of his right hand, the same fingers he had used to bestow blessings, were severed. His mutilated corpse was then dragged through the streets of Rome, a public spectacle of desecration. Finally, in a final act of ignominy, it was cast into the Tiber River, condemned to be lost in its murky depths, denied even a proper Christian burial. The Cadaver Synod, or Synodus Horrenda, as it became known, was intended to be the final word on Formosus, a complete erasure of his existence and influence. But Stephen VI miscalculated drastically. The sheer barbarity of the trial, the grotesque desecration of a former pope, sent shockwaves not just through Rome, but across the Christian world. Even in an age accustomed to political ruthlessness, this act was too much. Public outrage erupted. The people of Rome, initially silent in fear, soon turned on Stephen. They saw not justice, but sacrilege. They saw a man consumed by personal vendetta, not divine will. Within months, Pope Stephen VI was deposed, imprisoned, and strangled to death, himself a victim of the very political machinations he had used for his own ends. The story, however, doesn't end with Stephen's demise. Formosus's body was eventually recovered from the Tiber by a monk and initially given a quiet burial. But the political instability continued. Pope Theodore II, who briefly succeeded Stephen, annulled the Cadaver Synod and ordered Formosus's reburial with full papal honors in St. Peter's Basilica. Later, Pope Sergius III, an ally of the Spoleto faction and an enemy of Formosus, once again denounced him, though thankfully the body was not exhumed again. The Cadaver Synod became a dark stain on papal history, a stark example of the depths to which political infighting could drag the highest spiritual office. It led to intense debate, and ultimately, new decrees were issued to prevent such a shocking event from ever happening again, reinforcing the sanctity of papal office and the respect due to the dead. To this day, we may never fully grasp the raw, vindictive hatred that drove Pope Stephen VI to commit such an unspeakable act against a deceased predecessor. Was it pure political ambition, a desperate attempt to legitimize his own faction, or something even darker? The truth remains shrouded in the mists of history, a chilling reminder of the perilous intersection of faith and power. If you want to explore another dark chapter in papal history, check out my next video on Pope John XIII, the pornocrat Pope.